All right, so this is our simple, reproducible gospel sharing tool. So here's how I would share the gospel with someone. Hey, listen, I'm really sorry to hear that you're going through that, but I'd love to show you something that gives me hope when I'm going through tough times like that. And it really starts with God. It starts with understanding that God has a design for this world. And God created everything. He created me, created you, and He created us with a purpose. And that purpose is to know Him and enjoy Him and have a relationship with Him. But most often what we see in the world doesn't look like God's design. We see a lot of brokenness in our world. It kind of makes you wonder, how did we get here? What happened? Well, the answer is, each of us has turned away from God's design. And I can just speak for myself and say, I know that I've done this. And there's a word for this. It's called sin. And when we sin, when we turn away from God's design, it leads us to brokenness every time. You cannot escape this principle. And if you think about it, anytime you use something differently than what it was designed for, there's a good chance you're going to break it. And so we find ourselves in brokenness. But we know it's not right. We know that things should feel differently. We want life to be different, and so we start trying to fix it. We start trying to find ways out. And whether this is through drugs and alcohol, or through climbing the corporate ladder, just making a lot of money, or unhealthy relationships, there's always these attempts to get out, but the truth is nothing ever really works. The reason is because what we're designed for is a relationship with God, not a relationship with all of these things. Well, what's amazing is that in the midst of our brokenness, God did something about it. This is really amazing. That's why we call it good news. The gospel is the good news. And here's what happened. God sent His own Son, Jesus, down to earth. Jesus was God's design. He fully lived out everything God planned for His life. And part of that plan included giving His life to forgive us for our sins. So Jesus died on a cross to forgive us for our sins. But God proved His power over sin and brokenness by raising Him from the dead. So Jesus came down, died for our sins. God raised Him from the dead. Well, this is our way out of brokenness. But what we've got to do is turn away from all of these attempts and trust that only what Jesus did can truly change our lives. And so in my life, this is what I did. I found myself in brokenness, and I realized I'm not going to be able to fix this. And so I turned to the gospel, and I trusted what Jesus had done. And God brought me back to Himself, brought me back to His design, so that I could recover the plans He had always had for me. And I could begin to pursue those plans instead of my own. And that gives me great hope. So as you look at this, I wonder, where do you see yourself? And more particularly, what circle would you put yourself in? Now, most of the time, people will say brokenness. And from there, we're able to lead them to see that the gospel's made a way out. So I would ask, well, if you're experiencing brokenness, do you see that God's actually made a way for you to get back to His design and live the life He designed for you to live? And people are going to have different responses at that point. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make an invitation for them to believe the gospel and return to God.